Thanks, Efren. My show has to do with being in transit, when we're moving from one place to another, and we're essentially still between places, almost both places. We're neither here nor there, and we're in movement. And when we're doing that, sometimes we lose our peripheral attention, and the spaces we're moving through and the people we're moving with become sort of very fuzzy, and it's hard to really focus on those. So in some cases, it has to do with a fluid motion of things moving by us and how that feels, how it feels in your body. It's more than just an image. And this is what interests me with photography, is not just taking a picture, in this case, not just taking a photograph of another subway station, subway line with people standing there, but to somehow or another use my lens so that I can try to capture a feeling of, in this case, of movement being in transit. Pretty well all my work here, the variation of this is done in the camera with the lens. It's not photoshopped later. So this thing was shot in an iPhone like this. And this is basically the way it came out. That's really what my interest in this thing is. And the real creative part of photography actually is knowing where to aim your lens. So when I was standing on this subway platform, it was a matter of seeing this thing, seeing how the space was punctuated by all of these lines of that hold up the subway station roof and that sort of thing. But it also looks in some ways almost like pieces of film, of frames of film as it moves by. And then as I captured it using this motion, I get a feeling of movement as it moves down and as things move across. So that's really what my show is about. These images are part of the same thing, being in transit. I shot these in Montreal and in New York City last December. And the same thing, it has to do with, in this case, when you're moving down long passageways. Sometimes this happens when you're in a subway system and you're really paying attention to where the sign is and what you're supposed to do when you're there, but you're not really looking at the people around you or the surroundings around you. And in many cases, if somebody said, "Oh, did you see the person with the drum?" you think, "I never saw anybody with a drum," but you walked right by that person. I'm interested in figurative photography, so absolutely all of the images in here have people in them. But I'm interested in them as people or as representation of my species. This is not supposed to be George or Sally or somebody like that. It's supposed to represent a person moving through spaces or waiting in this case. The same thing here, we're waiting and subway cars are moving and there's moving, but I'm not. So there's this continual noise and whatever that blurs the senses. And you sometimes move through large spaces like these. This is in Montreal. You're not really paying a lot of attention to the detail. You're thinking about being in the next place. And we're in these same places with people. You know, we're in a subway car and you're sitting beside people, but you never make eye contact. You don't talk to that person. You've got your little bubble of space, and that person has their bubble. And it's interesting, when I was taking this image, clearly the woman sees me and she sees what I'm doing. And for me, I love the expression on her face, because for me, what she's tolerating what I'm doing, but there's an edge, and she knows I'm standing close to the edge, and if I go further, either she's going to turn away or she's going to tell me to do something, to stop. When I photograph people like this, you know, or close, if I get any indication that they're uncomfortable, I stop. So if she waves me off or something, I don't take the image, because I don't want to invade that closely, and other photographers are going to come behind me to photograph people. So I think it's a way, but I don't ask permission. I basically wait until a person says no, and at that point I stop doing what I'm doing. This image shot in Montreal, and what really fascinated me about it is when I saw it as I was approaching it, there were these figures, and for me, clearly these are not trees, these are people when I look at them and I see them on the platform. And for me, it was as though these are people, but they're on some kind of large game board. It's almost as though they're on a chessboard or something. And for me, it had something to do with thinking about how we all are all small pieces on some kind of large chessboard, where maybe we have little or very little control about really the big parts of our life as we move through it, as we're in transit. Everything is just being controlled by bigger forces, which is positive for me. I'm not worried about that, but this is what this image is about. These color ones are different, but shot more or less at the same time. These were done in Vancouver in January when it was raining a lot. And I had some time, and I was looking, same thing with being in transit, and I was down in some alleyways and small lanes downtown Vancouver, and it was wet. And what it really I noticed was that with the wet streets, the light, rather than coming from above down to you, the light comes from below up at you, and you get a different form of light, a different quality of light. And because of the nature of the very narrowness of the spaces, the light literally ricochets and the colors ricochet these things and come back. So that the colors that were on the wall, all of this graffiti and whatever else, comes through. And more or less what I'm trying to get here is not just a photograph of an alleyway, but I'm trying to photograph a feeling of color coming through this space. The same sort of thing here, where the color, for me, dominates the space, and sort of I get a feeling of color. That's what it's about. Light, photography is about light. And so in some cases, this is light which is reflected back up high. You get one quality of light. In this image, the light is much softer. And this is part of a very big image that I took. But the light is coming in through the side in the morning in North Vancouver when there's still fog coming through, land fog, and there's a very softness to the image, partially because of the way the light is coming across the image rather than up at you, and the fog creates that light. Let me show you two more. Over here. Two examples of light which really interest me. This one was shot in New York in December. December, the light is very low in the sky, the sun. And so we're looking south. The sun is low. It's coming down the canyon of these big buildings, and the light is very intense. It's not comfortable to walk into, long, big shadows, but you really get a feeling of the energy of sunlight. And that's really what I'm trying to capture here. Again, it's not a picture of a street in New York, but the energy of the sun coming through. This image, I decided to show the two together. Different sort of thing. The title is Come Rain or Come Shine. I was thinking about these images and I thought about that song, and I wanted to put the two of them together. So the same thing. This thing is the light's coming down at you, and this one the light is coming up at you from Vancouver from a really wet day. But both of them captures light. This is man-made reflected light, if you will, and this is sort of more of an intense overhead, spiritual almost light. That's the kind of work I do. Thank you very much, Efren.